The text arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that had already gone to hell. Mom wants you over for dinner tonight. Don't be late. Isabelle. I stared at my phone screen, sitting in my glass-walled office at Morrison & Associates Architecture, watching the rain streak down the windows like tears I refused to shed. 23 floors below, the city of Seattle moved in its usual rhythm, oblivious to the fact that my world was about to implode. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Don't be late. As if I was ever late to anything. As if punctuality wasn't one of the many things Isabelle had systematically criticized out of me over our 8-year marriage. I should have known something was wrong when Claudine Benoit requested my presence. My mother-in-law barely tolerated me on the best of days, treating me like an unfortunate stain on her daughter's otherwise pristine life. The woman had made it clear from day one that her precious Isabelle had married beneath her station. The drive to Claudine's Bellevue mansion took 45 minutes through Seattle traffic. Her house was a monument to old money, or at least the appearance of it, with its French colonial architecture, manicured gardens, and the kind of intimidating grandeur that made visitors feel small. I'd designed buildings that cost more than this house, but somehow Claudine's place always made me feel like I was 12 years old again, standing in the principal's office. Isabelle's BMW was already in the circular driveway when I arrived. I parked my practical Honda Accord behind it. The contrast between our vehicles a perfect metaphor for our relationship. She drove style, I drove function. The front door opened before I could knock. Claudine stood there in her usual uniform of designer black, her silver hair pulled back in a chignon that probably cost more than most people's rent. At 58, she was still an attractive woman, but there was something sharp and predatory in her pale blue eyes. "Daniel," she said, her slight French accent making my name sound like a disappointment. "You're exactly on time. How predictable." Claudine. I stepped into the marble foyer, noting the fresh orchids and the way the chandelier cast shadows that seemed deliberately dramatic. "Thank you for having me." She led me through the house toward the dining room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors like a countdown timer. "Isabelle is already here. We've been having the most interesting conversation." The dining room was set for 3, with Claudine's best china and crystal. Isabelle sat at the far end of the mahogany table, looking stunning as always in a burgundy dress that complemented her dark hair and olive skin. She glanced up when I entered, and I caught something in her expression. Guilt, maybe, or anticipation. It was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Hello, darling," she said, offering her cheek for a kiss. Her perfume was different, something French and expensive that I didn't recognize. "Hi." I kissed her cheek, noting how she tensed slightly at the contact. "How was your day?" "Busy. The Laurent account is taking up all my time at the agency." She picked up her wine glass, avoiding my eyes. "You know how demanding French clients can be." Claudine laughed, a sound like silver bells with sharp edges. "Oh, yes, the French can be quite particular about getting what they want." She poured me a glass of wine without asking if I wanted one. "Especially when it comes to matters of the heart." I sat down, accepting the wine and trying to read the undercurrents in the room. Something was happening here, something I wasn't quite grasping. The two women exchanged a look across the table, and Isabelle smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Daniel," Claudine said, settling into her chair with feline grace. "Isabelle was just telling me about her new project. Such an exciting opportunity for her career." "The Laurent account," I said. "You mentioned it." "Etienne Laurent," Isabelle said, and there was something in the way she said the name that made my stomach tighten. "He's opening a luxury hotel chain on the West Coast. The marketing contract could make my career." "How wonderful for you." I took a sip of wine, noting it was a vintage that probably cost more than I made in a week. Tell me about him. Another look passed between the women. Claudine leaned forward slightly, her eyes bright with malicious amusement. Oh, Etienne is quite charming, she said. Very handsome, very sophisticated. The kind of man who knows how to appreciate a woman's talents. Mother, Isabelle said sharply. What? I'm simply saying he has excellent taste. Claudine's smile was razor thin. Don't you think so, ma chérie? And then it happened, the moment that changed everything. Claudine turned to Isabelle and, in rapid French, said, Tu devrais lui dire maintenant. Il va découvrir de toute façon. Au moins comme ça, tu auras le contrôle. You should tell him now. He's going to find out anyway. At least this way, you'll have control. Isabelle responded without thinking. Non, pas encore. Etienne dit qu'il faut attendre le bon moment, après le contrat. No, not yet. Etienne says we need to wait for the right moment. After the contract. They both assumed I didn't understand. Why would I? I was just Daniel, the predictable architect who drove a Honda and wore off-the-rack suits. What would I know about French? What they didn't know was that I'd spent 2 years in Paris during college, studying architecture at École Spéciale. What they didn't know was that I'd been fluent in French for over 15 years. What they didn't know was that I'd just heard my wife discussing her affair with a client and the timing of when to destroy my life. I took another sip of wine, keeping my expression neutral while my world crumbled around me. The room felt suddenly cold, despite the warm lighting and the fire crackling in the fireplace. I'm sorry, I said in English, setting down my glass carefully. What were you two discussing? It sounded important. Claudine's smile widened, and she switched back to French, clearly enjoying herself. Nous parlions de la façon dont Isabelle va enfin avoir la vie qu'elle mérite, avec un homme qui peut lui donner tout ce qu'elle désire. We were talking about how Isabelle is finally going to have the life she deserves, with a man who can give her everything she wants. Isabelle looked uncomfortable now, glancing between her mother and me. Mother, please, not now. Pourquoi pas maintenant? Claudine continued in French. Il ne comprend pas de toute façon. Nous pourrions planifier ton divorce juste devant lui. Why not now? He doesn't understand anyway. We could plan your divorce right in front of him. That was the moment I decided to drop the bomb. I set down my fork, looked directly at Claudine, and in perfect, accent-free French said, Madame Benoit, je trouve votre conversation fascinante. Peut-être pourrions-nous discuter des détails de cette affaire un peu plus en détail? Madame Benoit, I find your conversation fascinating. Perhaps we could discuss the details of this affair in a bit more detail? The silence that followed was deafening. Isabelle's face went white, her wine glass freezing halfway to her lips. Claudine's mouth fell open, her composure cracking for the first time since I'd known her. You, Isabelle whispered. You speak French? Fluently, I said, switching back to English and enjoying the way both women seemed to shrink in their chairs. I studied in Paris for 2 years, École Spéciale d'Architecture. I thought I'd mentioned that. I hadn't, of course. I'd learned early in our relationship that Isabelle wasn't interested in my college stories or my achievements. She preferred to think of me as simple, predictable Daniel who built other people's dreams and never had any of his own. How long have you... Claudine started, then stopped. How long have I understood every conversation you've had in front of me? Every snide comment about my clothes, my car, my career, my inadequacies as a husband. I smiled, and it felt like ice forming on my lips. Every single one, Claudine, including tonight's discussion about Isabelle's affair with Etienne Laurent and your plans for my divorce. Isabelle set down her wine glass with shaking hands. Daniel, I can explain. Can you? I stood up, suddenly feeling calmer than I had in months. The uncertainty was over. The waiting was done. The truth was finally on the table, raw and undeniable. Please, by all means, explain how you're sleeping with your client while your mother plans my humiliation. Explain how you've been lying to my face while discussing your future with another man in a language you thought I couldn't understand. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I walked around the table, noting how both women tensed as I approached. The question is, what are we going to do about it? I leaned down and kissed Isabelle's forehead, gentle as a benediction. She flinched away from me. "Thank you for dinner, Claudine," I said politely. It was illuminating. "Isabelle, I'll see you at home. We have a great deal to discuss." I walked out of that house feeling like a different person than the one who had entered. Behind me, I could hear Claudine hissing at Isabelle in rapid French, their voices rising in panic and recrimination. Apparently, the only thing I hadn't designed in this marriage was a trap for my own humiliation, but that was about to change. If they wanted to play games, I'd show them what happened when an architect decided to build something new, something devastating. I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I drove to Pike Place Market and sat in my car, watching the late evening crowd thin out while I processed what I'd learned. The rain had stopped, but the windshield was still streaked with water, distorting the neon signs and streetlights into abstract patterns of color and light. Etienne Laurent. I pulled out my phone and did a quick search. The results were impressive and nauseating in equal measure. 41 years old, CEO of Laurent Luxury Holdings, based in Paris with recent expansion into North America. Handsome in that effortless European way, with silver-touched dark hair and the kind of confident smile that suggested he'd never been denied anything he wanted, including my wife, apparently. I scrolled through images of him at various business functions and charity galas, always impeccably dressed, often with beautiful women on his arm. In one photo from a Seattle business journal, I recognized the woman beside him. Isabelle, radiant in a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, looking up at him with an expression I hadn't seen her direct at me in years. The caption read, "Laurent Luxury Holdings CEO Etienne Laurent with marketing consultant Isabelle Moore at the Bellevue Arts Foundation Gala." Marketing consultant. Not marketing manager at Peterson and Associates, where she actually worked. The lie was so casual, so effortless, that it made me wonder how many others I'd missed. I drove home through the quiet streets of our Redmond neighborhood, past the perfect lawns and perfect houses filled with perfect families who probably weren't lying to each other in multiple languages. Our house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a modern minimalist design I'd been proud of when we'd built it 5 years ago. Now it looked cold and sterile, like a museum exhibit of a marriage that had died without anyone bothering to plan a funeral. Isabelle's BMW wasn't in the driveway yet. Good. I needed time to think, to plan, to decide exactly how I wanted to handle this. Inside, the house felt different. Every room, every piece of furniture, every carefully chosen decoration now seemed like evidence of a lie I'd been living. The open floor plan I'd designed to bring us closer together had instead created spaces where we could avoid each other with architectural precision. I poured myself a scotch. The good stuff, a bottle of Macallan 18 that Isabelle had bought me for my last birthday, and sat down in my home office. The room was lined with bookshelves filled with architecture texts, project portfolios, and scale models of buildings I'd designed. My achievements, my passion, my life's work, none of which had been enough to keep my wife interested. The laptop was password protected, but I knew Isabelle's habits. She used the same password for everything. Bella 2015, the year we'd bought this house. She'd never been good with security, always assuming that people were exactly who they appeared to be. Her email was a treasure trove of deception. The affair had been going on for 4 months, starting with professional meetings that gradually became personal dinners, then weekend business trips to Vancouver, where Laurent was scouting locations. The progression was depressingly predictable, but the details were what made my hands shake as I scrolled through message after message. "Mon chéri," one email began, Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about the way you touched me at the hotel. Daniel suspects nothing. He's so wrapped up in his buildings that he barely notices I exist. I've never felt as alive as I do when I'm with you. Another, more recent. Etienne, we need to be careful. Mother thinks we should tell Daniel soon, but I'm not ready. The Laurent contract could set me up for life, and I don't want to complicate things until it's signed. Can you wait a little longer? I promise it will be worth it. His responses were equally damning, written in a mixture of English and French that painted a picture of a man who collected beautiful things and discarded them when he grew bored. He called her Ma Belle Isabelle and made promises about their future together that I suspected he had no intention of keeping. But it was the final email, sent just 3 hours ago, that made me set down my scotch with careful precision. Darling, Mother is insisting on having Daniel to dinner tonight. She wants to test the waters about a divorce. I told her it's too soon, but you know how she gets. She thinks he's too stupid to catch on, and honestly, she might be right. He's never shown any interest in my work or my life outside of his precious buildings. I'll call you after dinner and let you know how it goes. Je t'aime. Too stupid to catch on. Never shown any interest in her work. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair, feeling something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak. That would come later, in quiet moments when I wasn't expecting it. This was something else, something calculating and precise and absolutely merciless. If Isabelle wanted to play games, I'd show her what happened when someone with my particular skills decided to get creative. I spent the next hour going through her other accounts. Social media, banking, credit cards, phone records. The digital footprint of an affair was surprisingly extensive when you knew what to look for. Hotel bills charged to her personal credit card, expensive dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together, lingerie purchases from boutiques I'd never heard of. The most damning evidence was in her phone, which she'd left charging on the kitchen counter. The same password, the same casual assumption that I was too stupid or too trusting to look. The text messages were worse than the emails. More immediate, more intimate, more cruel. Screenshots of conversations where she mocked my boring career, my predictable personality, my apparent inability to satisfy her in bed. Laurent's responses encouraged her complaints, positioning himself as her savior from a life of suburban mediocrity. One exchange from last week made me pour another scotch. Isabelle. He actually asked me if I wanted to go to some architecture conference in Portland next month, like I'd want to spend a weekend listening to him talk about building codes and sustainable materials. Etienne. Poor Ma Belle, trapped with such a dull man. Don't worry, soon you'll be free to live the life you deserve. I'm planning something special for us in Paris next month. Isabelle. I can't wait. Sometimes I look at him and wonder what I was thinking when I married him. He's like a piece of furniture, functional, but completely forgettable. Functional but completely forgettable. 8 years of marriage reduced to a furniture comparison. I was still reading when I heard her car in the driveway. I quickly closed everything, cleared the browser history, and returned her phone to its charging station. By the time she walked through the front door, I was sitting in the living room with my scotch, looking like the boring, predictable husband she'd described to her lover. Daniel? Her voice was tentative, uncertain. We need to talk. She stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, still beautiful in that burgundy dress, but now I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was trying to figure out how much damage control was needed, how much truth she could get away with revealing. Yes, I said calmly. We do. She sat down across from me, perching on the edge of the white leather sofa we'd chosen together 3 years ago. Everything in this room was a decision we'd made as a couple, back when I'd still believed we were building a life together instead of an elaborate stage set for my humiliation. About tonight, she began. About what Mother said. Which part? I took a sip of scotch, enjoying the way she flinched at my tone. The part where she discussed my inadequacies as a husband, or the part where you two planned the timing of my divorce? It's not like that. But her voice lacked conviction. Mother gets carried away sometimes. You know how she is. I know exactly how she is. The question is, how are you, Isabelle? She looked down at her hands, and I noticed she was still wearing her wedding ring. The diamond caught the light from the recessed fixtures I'd carefully positioned to create the perfect ambiance for our perfect life. I'm confused, she said finally, about what I want, about what we have together. Are you confused about Etienne Laurent? The name hit her like a physical blow. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with something between fear and defiance. How do you know about your lover? About your 4-month affair? About your weekend trips to Vancouver and your plans to leave me after his contract is signed? I smiled, and I could see my expression reflected in her eyes, cold, sharp, completely unlike the man she thought she'd married. I pay attention, Isabelle, more than you think. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out her next move. Finally, she straightened up, and some of her mother's arrogance crept into her posture. Fine, she said. Yes, I'm seeing Etienne. Yes, I'm thinking about leaving you. Are you happy now? Happy? I considered the question. No, I wouldn't say happy, but I am enlightened. What's that supposed to mean? I stood up, setting down my empty glass with deliberate care. It means that for the first time in years, I know exactly where I stand. It means the uncertainty is over. It means I can stop wondering why my wife seems so distant, so dissatisfied, so eager to spend time anywhere but here. Daniel? It means, I continued, walking toward the stairs, that I can stop being the boring, predictable, functional piece of furniture you married and start being something else entirely. What are you talking about? I paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at her. She was still sitting on the edge of the sofa, looking small and uncertain in that expensive dress. I'm talking about consequences, Isabelle. I'm talking about what happens when someone with my particular skills decides to get creative. I smiled again, and this time I didn't bother to make it warm. I'm talking about showing you and your lover and your mother exactly what this boring architect can build when he puts his mind to it. I went upstairs to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and began planning the demolition of everything they thought they knew about Daniel Moore. Tomorrow, the real construction would begin. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my desk until dawn, sketching out plans with the same methodical precision I used for building designs. But instead of creating something new, I was planning a demolition. Isabelle had retreated to the guest room after our conversation, claiming she needed space to think. Fine by me. I needed space to work. By morning, I had a comprehensive dossier on Etienne Laurent and a clear understanding of the battlefield I was entering. Laurent Luxury Holdings was expanding aggressively into the North American market, but the company's finances were more precarious than they appeared. Several of his European ventures were hemorrhaging money, propped up by increasingly desperate loans and creative accounting. More importantly, Laurent was married. His wife, Celeste Laurent, was the daughter of a prominent Parisian banking family and held significant shares in his company. A divorce would be financially catastrophic for him, which explained why he was being so careful about his affair with Isabelle. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was playing the same game with my wife that she was playing with me, keeping his options open until the timing was right. I showered and dressed for work, choosing a charcoal gray suit that Isabelle had always said made me look too serious. Perfect. Today, serious was exactly what I wanted to be. Isabelle was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, still in her robe, clutching a cup of coffee like a lifeline. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "Daniel," she said as I poured my own coffee. "About last night." "What about it?" "I think we should talk to someone." A counselor, maybe. Work through this together. I turned to face her, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way she couldn't quite meet my gaze. Work through what, exactly? Your affair? Your plans to divorce me? Your mother's involvement in humiliating me? It doesn't have to be this way. Her voice was small, uncertain. We could try to fix things. Fix things. I tasted the words, found them bitter. Tell me, Isabelle, when you were in bed with Laurent, were you thinking about fixing things with me? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I've spent 8 years building a life with someone who sees me as a piece of furniture? Is it fair that you've been planning my divorce while I've been planning our anniversary trip? Anniversary trip? She looked genuinely confused. Hawaii. Next month. I made reservations at that resort you mentioned last year. I shook my head. But I suppose you'll be busy in Paris with your lover instead. The confusion in her eyes shifted to something that might have been guilt, or maybe just irritation at being caught in another lie. I didn't know you were planning anything. There's a lot you don't know about me, Isabelle, but you're going to learn. I left her standing in the kitchen and drove to work through the morning Seattle traffic, my mind already shifting to the next phase of my plan. Morrison & Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Seattle. I'd been with the firm for 6 years, working my way up from junior architect to senior project manager. My colleagues respected my work, even if they found me a bit reserved. What they didn't know was that I'd been saving that reservation for my personal life, where I'd foolishly believed it was safe to be vulnerable. That ended today. My first stop was HR, where I had a carefully casual conversation with Janet Morrison, the founder's daughter and the firm's director of human resources. Janet was in her mid-40s, divorced, and had always been friendly toward me in a professional way. Daniel, she said when I knocked on her office door. Come in. How are you doing? I've been better, I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. I'm dealing with some personal issues that might affect my work, and I wanted to be upfront about it. Janet's expression shifted to concern. She was good at her job, and part of that job was reading people. What's going on? My marriage is falling apart. I let just enough pain show in my voice to make it believable. Isabelle is having an affair with one of her clients. I just found out. Oh, Daniel. Janet leaned forward, her professional demeanor softening. I'm so sorry. That must be devastating. It is. But what makes it worse is that the client is someone we might end up working with. Etienne Laurent, from Laurent Luxury Holdings. He's been courting us for a hotel project, and now... I shrugged helplessly. I don't know how to handle the conflict of interest. Janet's eyes sharpened. She understood immediately. That's definitely a problem. If your wife is involved with a potential client, there could be ethical issues, not to mention the personal complications for you. I don't want to cause problems for the firm, I said. But I also can't pretend this isn't happening. Laurent has been pushing hard for a meeting, and I'm not sure I can handle being in the same room with him right now. Let me handle Laurent, Janet said firmly. I'll have someone else take over any communications with his company. As for your wife... She paused delicately. Is she aware that her relationship could impact her own career? I don't think she's considered the professional implications, I said, which was true enough. She works for Peterson & Associates, and they have strict policies about client relationships. Janet nodded knowingly. The marketing world was small in Seattle, and everyone knew everyone else's business. I'll make some discreet inquiries. Sometimes these things have a way of sorting themselves out. I thanked her and left her office, knowing that within 24 hours the Whisper network would be buzzing with speculation about Isabelle's inappropriate client relationship. In a city like Seattle, reputation was everything, and Janet Morrison's discreet inquiries would be anything but. My next stop was the boxing gym I'd joined 6 months ago but rarely used. Iron Temple was in a converted warehouse in Georgetown, the kind of place where serious fighters trained and office workers came to pretend they were tough. I'd signed up during a brief fitness kick that Isabelle had mocked into extinction, but now I had different reasons for being there. The gym smelled like sweat and determination, echoing with the sounds of heavy bags being pummeled and jump ropes hitting concrete floors. I found the owner, Mickey Torino, in his office reviewing training schedules. Mickey was in his 60s, a former middleweight who'd trained champions before opening his own place. He was compact and weathered, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "More," he said when I knocked on his doorframe. "Haven't seen you in months. Finally ready to get serious?" Something like that. I sat down across from his cluttered desk. "I need to learn how to fight." Mickey studied me for a long moment. "Most people come here wanting to get in shape or blow off steam. You look like you want to hurt someone." "Maybe I do. Want to talk about it?" I found myself telling Mickey about Isabelle, about the affair, about the humiliation of discovering that my wife saw me as weak and predictable. I didn't mention my plans for revenge. Mickey struck me as the type who might try to talk me out of them. "Women," Mickey said when I finished. "Can't live with them. Can't legally hit them with a baseball bat." I laughed despite myself. Something like that. "Look, kid, I've seen a lot of guys come through here after their wives screwed them over. Some of them channel that anger into something productive. Others just let it eat them alive." He leaned forward. "Which one are you going to be?" "The productive kind." "Good. But let me tell you something about fighting. It's not about throwing punches. It's about leverage. It's about finding your opponent's weakness and exploiting it. It's about making them defeat themselves." I nodded, understanding more than he knew. "When can we start?" "Now, if you want. But first, let me ask you something. This guy your wife is screwing around with, you planning on confronting him?" "Eventually." "Then you need to understand something. Real fighting isn't about being the toughest guy in the room. It's about being the smartest. You don't win by being stronger than your opponent. You win by making them make mistakes." Over the next 2 hours, Mickey taught me the basics of boxing: stance, footwork, how to throw a proper punch without breaking my hand. But more importantly, he taught me about strategy, about patience, about waiting for the right moment to strike. "Your wife and her boyfriend think they're in control," he said as we wrapped up the session. "They think they're calling the shots, but they've made a mistake." "What's that?" "They underestimated you, and that's the kind of mistake that gets people hurt." I left the gym feeling different, not just physically tired but mentally focused in a way I hadn't been in years. The anger was still there, but it was controlled now, channeled into something useful. That evening, I had dinner alone at a restaurant downtown, taking my time over a good steak and a bottle of wine while I refined my plans. Isabelle texted twice, asking when I'd be home, but I didn't respond. Let her wonder. Let her worry. Let her start to understand what uncertainty felt like. When I finally returned to the house, it was after 10 o'clock. Isabelle was waiting in the living room, still dressed but clearly anxious. "Where were you?" she demanded. "I was worried." "Were you?" I hung up my jacket with deliberate care. "How unusual." "Daniel, please. We need to talk about this like adults." "Adults." I poured myself a scotch from the bar cart we'd received as a wedding gift. Do adults lie to their spouses for 4 months? Do adults plan divorces in foreign languages? Do adults mock their partners to their lovers? Her face went pale. "How do you know about what? Your text messages? Your emails? Your detailed descriptions of how boring I am in bed?" I took a sip of scotch, enjoying the way she seemed to shrink into herself. "I know a lot of things, Isabelle. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you want from me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I want you to understand something," I said, moving closer until I was standing directly in front of her. I want you to understand that the man you married, the boring, predictable, functional piece of furniture, that man is gone. What you have now is someone who knows exactly who you are and exactly what you've done. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared, because tomorrow the real fun begins. I finished my scotch and headed upstairs, leaving her alone with her fear and her guilt and her rapidly diminishing options. In my office, I pulled up the architectural plans I'd been working on. Not for a building this time, but for something far more complex and infinitely more satisfying. The systematic destruction of everyone who had betrayed me. The next morning brought the first tangible results of my planning. I was in my office at Morrison & Associates, reviewing blueprints for a residential complex, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Etienne Laurent. I believe we need to talk. Café Presse, 2 p.m. today. Come alone." I stared at the message, feeling a cold smile spread across my face. Laurent was making his first mistake, assuming he could intimidate me, control the narrative, manage the situation like any other business problem. He had no idea what he was dealing with. I typed back, "I'll be there." Café Presse was a French bistro in Capitol Hill, the kind of place that served overpriced coffee to people who wanted to feel sophisticated. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table in the back corner where I could watch the entrance. At exactly 2 p.m., Etienne Laurent walked in. He was even more impressive in person than in his photographs. Tall, elegantly dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car payment, with the kind of effortless confidence that came from never being denied anything. He moved through the cafe like he owned it, drawing glances from other patrons. "Daniel Moore," he said, extending his hand as he reached my table. His accent was subtle, but unmistakable. "Thank you for coming." I stood and shook his hand, noting his firm grip and the expensive watch on his wrist. "Mr. Laurent, I was curious to hear what you had to say." We sat down across from each other, two men who shared nothing except a woman who was lying to both of us. The irony was delicious. "I'll be direct," Laurent said after ordering an espresso. "I know this situation is difficult for you, but I want you to understand that what's happening between Isabelle and me is not casual. We have genuine feelings for each other." "How romantic." I sipped my coffee, keeping my expression neutral. "Tell me, does your wife share those feelings?" For the first time, Laurent's composure cracked slightly. "My wife?" "Celeste Laurent, daughter of the Dubois banking family, your business partner and the mother of your 2 children. I smiled pleasantly. "Did you mention her to Isabelle, or is that another one of those inconvenient details you've chosen to omit?" Laurent recovered quickly, but I'd seen the flash of surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to do my homework. "My marriage is complicated," he said carefully. "Celeste and I have an understanding." "I'm sure you do. Just like Isabelle and I had an understanding that she wouldn't sleep with her clients." I leaned forward slightly. "But understandings have a way of changing, don't they?" "What do you want, Daniel?" Laurent's voice had hardened, the charm replaced by something colder. "Money? I'm prepared to make this worth your while." "You want to pay me off?" I laughed, genuinely amused. "That's your solution? Write a check and make the inconvenient husband disappear?" "I'm trying to handle this like a gentleman." A gentleman. I tasted the word, found it bitter. Is it gentlemanly to seduce another man's wife? Is it gentlemanly to make promises you have no intention of keeping? Is it gentlemanly to lie to a woman about your marital status while she plans to destroy her own marriage? Laurent's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the situation." "I understand it perfectly. You're a wealthy married man having an affair with my wife, while she destroys our marriage for a fantasy future that will never happen. You're using her for sex and business connections, while she's using you for career advancement and an escape from her boring life." I finished my coffee and set down the cup with deliberate precision. The only question is, which one of you is going to be more disappointed when reality sets in? Isabelle is a remarkable woman, Laurent said stiffly. She deserves better than what? Than a husband who loves her? Than a man who's spent 8 years building a life with her? I stood up, noting how he tensed as I moved. You're right about one thing, Etienne. She does deserve better. But not from you. I started to leave, then paused and turned back to him. One more thing, I said, switching to French. The next time you want to discuss my wife, you might want to make sure you know who you're talking to. I understand a lot more than people think. I left him sitting there, his expensive espresso growing cold while he processed the implications of what I'd just said. If he was smart, he'd realize that his careful game had just become infinitely more complicated. But I was counting on him not being that smart. That evening, I implemented the second phase of my plan. I'd spent the afternoon researching Isabelle's colleagues at Peterson & Associates, particularly her supervisor, Margaret Wiley, and the company's ethics policies regarding client relationships. Peterson & Associates was a mid-sized marketing firm that prided itself on professionalism and ethical business practices. Their employee handbook was very clear about relationships with clients. They were strictly forbidden without prior disclosure and approval from senior management. I crafted an anonymous email to Margaret Wiley, carefully worded to sound like it came from a concerned colleague rather than a vengeful husband. Margaret, I thought you should be aware of a potential conflict of interest involving one of your account managers. Isabelle Moore appears to be having a personal relationship with Etienne Laurent from Laurent Luxury Holdings, the client she's been working with on the hotel project. I've seen them together at several non-business functions, and their interactions seemed quite intimate. I'm not sure if this has been disclosed to management, but given the size of the Laurent contract, I thought you should know. A concerned colleague. I sent the email from a throwaway account created through a VPN, making it untraceable. By tomorrow morning, Isabelle would have much bigger problems than managing her affair. The third part of my evening's work was more personal. I called my lawyer, Robert Kim, whom I'd worked with on various business contracts over the years. Daniel, Robert said when he answered. How are you? It's been a while. I've been better, Rob. I need some legal advice about divorce proceedings in Washington State. There was a pause. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you and Isabelle having problems? She's having an affair. I want to know what my options are. Okay. Robert's voice shifted into professional mode. Washington is a no-fault divorce state, so the affair itself won't impact the divorce proceedings, but it could affect property division if she's been spending marital assets on the relationship. Do you have documentation? Extensive documentation. Hotel bills, restaurant charges, gifts purchased with joint credit cards, plus communications detailing the affair and her plans to leave me. Good. That could be useful in establishing financial misconduct. What about assets? The house is in my name only. I owned it before we married. We have joint bank accounts, investment accounts. Her car loan is in both our names. She makes good money, so alimony probably won't be an issue. Sounds relatively straightforward, assuming she doesn't contest it. Are you ready to file? Not yet. I want to wait for the right moment. But I want everything prepared so I can move quickly when the time comes. I'll draw up the papers. Daniel. Robert paused. Are you doing okay? This kind of betrayal can be devastating. I'm handling it, I said. Better than she thinks. After I hung up, I sat in my office reviewing the day's work. Laurent was rattled. Isabelle's job was about to become very complicated, and the legal groundwork was being laid for a divorce that would leave her with far less than she expected. But I was just getting started. I heard Isabelle's car in the driveway around 9 o'clock. She'd been working late more often recently, or at least, that's what she claimed. Tonight, I suspected she'd been debriefing with Laurent about our afternoon meeting. She found me in the living room, reading a book about French architecture that I'd pulled from my collection. The irony wasn't accidental. How was your day? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Interesting. I had coffee with your boyfriend. She froze halfway through taking off her jacket. What? Etienne Laurent. Charming man. Very direct. He wanted to discuss our situation. I looked up from my book, enjoying the way her face had gone pale. Did he mention that he's married? That's complicated. I'm sure it is. Just like our marriage has become complicated. I closed the book and set it aside. Tell me, Isabelle, when you were planning your future with Etienne, did you factor in his wife and children, or were you assuming he'd abandon them the same way you're planning to abandon me? It's not like that. But her voice lacked conviction. What's it like then? Explain it to me. She sat down across from me, and I could see her struggling to find words that would make her betrayal sound reasonable. I'm not happy, Daniel. I haven't been happy for a long time. We're like strangers living in the same house. And whose fault is that? Both of ours, maybe. But Etienne makes me feel alive again. He makes me feel like I matter. You've always mattered to me. Have I? When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my goals, what I wanted from life? When was the last time you looked at me like I was the most important thing in the world? The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Somewhere along the way, we'd stopped seeing each other clearly, but that didn't justify what she'd done. When was the last time you told me your dreams? I countered. When was the last time you asked about mine? Marriage is a partnership, Isabelle. It requires effort from both people. I know that, but it also requires passion, excitement, the feeling that you're building something amazing together. When did we stop having that? I don't know. But I know when you stopped trying to find it with me. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 8 years and 1,000 small failures hanging between us. What happens now? She asked finally. Now you have to decide what you want. But you should know that your choices have consequences. For both of us. What does that mean? I stood up, suddenly tired of the conversation. It means that actions have reactions, Isabelle. It means that when you destroy something, you don't get to control what grows in its place. I went upstairs, leaving her alone with her guilt and her increasingly limited options. Tomorrow would bring new challenges for her, new complications she hadn't anticipated. And I would be there to watch it all unfold, the architect of her destruction, building something beautiful and terrible from the rubble of our marriage. Margaret Wiley called Isabelle into her office at 9:15 a.m. the next morning. I knew this because Isabelle texted me in a panic. Emergency meeting with Margaret. Something's wrong. Call you later. I was in my own office, pretending to review construction specifications while actually monitoring the fallout from my anonymous email. The beauty of working in Seattle's interconnected professional community was that news traveled fast, especially scandalous news about ethics violations. My phone rang at 10:30. Isabelle's name appeared on the screen, but when I answered, I could hear she was crying. Daniel, I need to come home. I've been suspended. Suspended from what? From work. Someone reported my relationship with Etienne. They're conducting an investigation into whether I violated company policy. Her voice was shaking. They've taken me off the Laurent account immediately. I'm sorry to hear that. I kept my voice carefully neutral, professional. What did you tell them? The truth. That Etienne and I have developed feelings for each other, but that it hasn't affected my professional judgment. She was crying harder now. But Margaret doesn't believe me. She says the appearance of impropriety is enough to damage the company's reputation. Appearances matter in business, Isabelle. You know that. This could ruin my career, Daniel. If Peterson lets me go, no other agency in Seattle will touch me. Everyone will know why I was fired. The desperation in her voice was almost enough to make me feel sorry for her. Almost. Maybe you should have thought about that before you started sleeping with your client. That's not fair. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You gambled your career on a married man who was never going to leave his wife for you. You lost. Now you're facing the consequences. There was silence on the other end of the line, broken only by her quiet sobbing. "Can you come home?" she asked finally. "Please. I need you." "I'm in the middle of a project timeline. I'll be home around 6. I hung up before she could respond, let her sit in our empty house, contemplating the wreckage of her carefully planned affair. Let her understand what it felt like to have your world collapse, while the person who should support you remained coldly distant. But I wasn't done. Not even close. At lunch, I drove to Laurent's hotel. He was staying at the Four Seasons naturally, in a suite that probably cost more per night than most people made in a week. I didn't try to see him. That would come later. Instead, I had a conversation with the concierge, a young man named Marcus, who was eager to please a potential guest. "I'm thinking about booking a suite for my anniversary," I told him, pulling out my phone. "My wife mentioned that a friend of ours, Etienne Laurent, is staying here and loves it. Could you tell me what type of suite he has?" Marcus checked his computer. "Mr. Laurent is in the presidential suite on the 23rd floor. It's our finest accommodation, with panoramic city views and a full kitchen." "Perfect. And I assume he's been enjoying the hotel's amenities?" "Oh yes, he's been a wonderful guest. He's dined at our restaurant several times, always with the same lovely companion." Marcus smiled conspiratorially. They make a very attractive couple. I thanked Marcus and left a generous tip, along with my business card in case he ever needed architectural services. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd just recorded our entire conversation on my phone. That afternoon, I made another call to Robert Kim. "Rob, it's Daniel. I need to accelerate the divorce timeline." "What's happened?" "Isabelle's been suspended from her job for the affair. She's vulnerable right now, which means she might be more willing to negotiate a reasonable settlement. Or she might dig in and fight harder because she has less to lose. I don't think so. She's scared. Her career is in jeopardy, her affair is public knowledge, and her lover is about to have his own problems. She'll want this resolved quickly and quietly." "What kind of problems is the lover going to have?" I smiled, even though Robert couldn't see it. "The kind that happen when his wife finds out about his American girlfriend." There was a pause. "Daniel, please tell me you're not planning anything illegal." "Nothing illegal, just informative. Be careful. Revenge has a way of backfiring." "This isn't revenge, Rob. It's consequences." That evening, I stopped at the boxing gym before going home. Mickey was working with a young heavyweight, calling out combinations while the fighter pounded a heavy bag with methodical precision. "Moore?" Mickey called when he saw me. "You look like a man with something on his mind." "My wife got suspended from her job today. For the affair." Mickey nodded approvingly. "Good. Actions have consequences. How's she handling it?" "Not well. She's scared, desperate. Wants me to comfort her." "And will you?" I considered the question while I wrapped my hands for training. "I don't know who I am anymore, Mickey. For 8 years, I was the supportive husband, the understanding partner, the man who put her needs first, but that man was a fool. Maybe. Or maybe he was just trusting the wrong person." Mickey held the heavy bag while I threw combinations, each punch carrying months of suppressed anger. "The question is, who do you want to be now? Someone who doesn't get taken advantage of. Good. But remember what I told you about fighting smart. Don't let anger make you stupid." I spent an hour working out, pushing my body until the physical exhaustion matched my emotional fatigue. When I finally drove home, I felt clearer, more focused. Isabelle was waiting in the kitchen, a bottle of wine open on the counter. She'd changed into a black dress I'd always liked, and her makeup was carefully applied to hide the evidence of her earlier tears. "I made dinner," she said when I walked in. "Your favorite, beef bourguignon." The smell was incredible, rich and complex. She was an excellent cook when she wanted to be, which had become increasingly rare over the past few years. Thank you. I hung up my jacket and accepted the glass of wine she offered. How are you feeling? Better. I've been thinking about what you said, about consequences and choices. She moved closer, her hand touching my arm. I want to fix this, Daniel. I want to fix us. Do you? Yes. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling, take a vacation, remember why we fell in love. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't want to lose you. I studied her face, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus calculated manipulation. The problem was, I was no longer sure I could tell the difference. What about Etienne? It's over. I ended it today. She moved closer, her body pressed against mine. He was never what I thought he was. You're my husband. You're the one I should have been fighting for all along. And if I hadn't found out, would you still be planning your divorce and your new life in Paris? She flinched, but didn't pull away. I don't know. Maybe. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that we have a chance to start over. I set down my wine glass and stepped back, creating distance between us. Isabelle, do you know why I married you? Because you loved me? Because I thought you were honest. I thought you were someone I could trust completely, someone who would never lie to me or betray me or make me question my own judgment. I shook my head. But you've been lying to me for months, about where you were, who you were with, how you felt about our marriage. You've been planning to leave me while letting me believe we were building a future together. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix broken trust, Isabelle. Sorry doesn't undo 4 months of betrayal. Sorry doesn't erase the things you said about me to your lover. Her face went pale. What things? That I was boring, predictable, forgettable. That you wondered what you were thinking when you married me. I smiled coldly. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was too stupid to piece it together? Daniel, those things I said, I was angry, confused. I didn't mean them. You meant them enough to say them. You meant them enough to plan a life without me. I picked up my wine glass again, noting how my hand was perfectly steady. The question is, what do we do now? We fight for our marriage. We remember what we mean to each other. What do you mean to me, Isabelle? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it, struggling for an answer. I'm your wife, she said finally. You're the woman I married. But wives don't betray their husbands. Wives don't lie and cheat and plan secret divorces. Wives don't mock their partners to their lovers. I finished my wine and set the glass down with deliberate care. So what are you exactly? I'm someone who made terrible mistakes, but wants to make things right. And I'm someone who's tired of being taken for granted. I walked toward the stairs, then paused and looked back at her. She was standing in the kitchen surrounded by the dinner she'd made, the wine she'd opened, the seduction scene she'd carefully orchestrated, looking lost and desperate and suddenly very young. The beef bourguignon smells wonderful, I said, but I'm not hungry anymore. I left her there and went upstairs to my office, where I had one more task to complete before the day was over. I pulled up my computer and began composing an email to Celeste Laurent in Paris. It was time for Etienne's wife to learn about her husband's American business trip. After all, every marriage deserved honesty, even if mine was beyond saving. Celeste Laurent arrived in Seattle on a Thursday morning flight from Paris. I know this because I'd been monitoring Etienne's hotel reservations and noticed that his presidential suite booking had been changed from single occupancy to double, with a notation about airport pickup service. I was having coffee at a cafe across from the Four Seasons when the Blacktown car pulled up. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in Etienne's posture as he helped an elegant blonde woman out of the car. Celeste Laurent was beautiful in that effortless French way, with perfect posture and the kind of expensive clothes that whispered rather than shouted their cost. She was also clearly furious. Even from across the street, I could see the rigid set of her shoulders, the way she walked slightly ahead of her husband, the careful distance she maintained between them. My email had done its job. I'd kept the message simple and direct. Madame Laurent, I regret to inform you that your husband is having an affair with my wife Isabelle Moore during his business trip to Seattle. I thought you deserved to know. I have documentation if you require proof. Daniel Moore. I'd included her husband's hotel information, Isabelle's workplace details, and several photographs I'd taken of them together. Nothing illegal, nothing obtained through questionable means, just the truth, presented clearly and without editorial comment. Apparently, Celeste Laurent was the type of woman who preferred to handle problems in person. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabelle. Etienne's wife is here. She knows everything. This is a disaster. I typed back, yes, it is. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Etienne Laurent's name appeared on the screen. You bastard, he said without preamble when I answered. You contacted my wife. I did. She deserved to know the truth. You have no idea what you've done. Celeste controls 40% of my company. She could destroy me. Then you probably shouldn't have been cheating on her. This is between you and me, Daniel. Leave my family out of it. Your family was in it the moment you decided to sleep with my wife. I was walking through Pike Place Market, surrounded by tourists and vendors, feeling oddly calm despite the rage in Laurent's voice. Besides, I thought you said Celeste understood about your affairs. That's different. Different how? Because this time you got caught? Because this time there are consequences? You don't understand the situation? I understand it perfectly. You're a married man who thought he could have an affair without anyone getting hurt. You were wrong. I paused at a flower vendor, admiring the bright blooms. How is Celeste handling the news? She's upset. I imagine she is. Finding out your husband is planning to leave you for his American mistress must be quite a shock. I never said I was leaving Celeste. The words hung in the air between us, and I could hear the moment when Laurent realized what he'd just admitted. Interesting, I said. Does Isabelle know that? Does she know you were never planning to leave your wife for her? Silence. I thought not. I bought a bouquet of white roses, thinking they'd look nice on Isabelle's grave, metaphorically speaking. You used her, Etienne, just like she used me. The only difference is, I'm not pretending otherwise. What do you want? His voice was defeated now, the arrogance gone. I want you to tell my wife the truth, all of it. I want you to explain that you were never going to leave Celeste, that this was just a convenient affair, that she destroyed her marriage for nothing. And if I do that, then maybe I'll stop sending your wife updates about your relationship. You're blackmailing me. I'm encouraging honesty in marriage. Surely you can appreciate that. I hung up before he could respond and continued my walk through the market, feeling lighter than I had in months. That afternoon, I received a call from Margaret Wiley at Peterson & Associates. Mr. Moore? This is Margaret Wiley, Isabelle's supervisor. I was wondering if we could meet to discuss the situation with your wife. What about it? We're conducting a thorough investigation into her relationship with Etienne Laurent, and we'd appreciate your perspective as someone who was affected by the situation. I agreed to meet her at a downtown coffee shop after work. Margaret was a sharp-eyed woman in her early 50s, with the kind of professional demeanor that suggested she'd dealt with her share of workplace drama. I want to be clear, she said after we'd ordered coffee, that this conversation is confidential. We're trying to understand the full scope of what happened so we can make appropriate decisions about Isabelle's future with the company. I understand. What would you like to know? How long were you aware of your wife's relationship with Mr. Laurent? I discovered it 3 days ago, although the affair had been going on for about 4 months. Margaret made notes on a tablet. Were you aware that she was working on the Laurent account during this time? Yes, but I assumed it was purely professional. Isabelle has always been good at separating her personal and professional lives. I paused. Or so I thought. Did she ever discuss Mr. Laurent with you? Mention anything about their working relationship that seemed inappropriate? She mentioned that he was demanding, that he required a lot of personal attention. She said French clients expected a higher level of service. I shrugged. I didn't realize she meant sexual service. Margaret's mouth tightened. Mr. Moore, I want you to know that Peterson and Associates takes these matters very seriously. We have strict policies about client relationships precisely because they can compromise our professional integrity. What will happen to Isabelle? That depends on the outcome of our investigation. But I can tell you that the Laurent contract has been terminated. Mr. Laurent's company contacted us this morning to end the relationship, citing personal complications that made it impossible to continue. Interesting. Celeste Laurent worked fast. I'm sorry this situation has affected your company, I said. I know Isabelle valued her career. Valued it enough to risk it, apparently. Margaret closed her tablet. Mr. Moore, can I ask what you're planning to do about your marriage? I'm planning to end it. My lawyer is preparing divorce papers. She nodded sympathetically. I'm sorry. This must be incredibly difficult for you. It is, but I'm learning that sometimes difficult is necessary. When I got home that evening, I found Isabelle in the living room with a suitcase beside her chair. She looked exhausted, her face pale and drawn, her usual confidence completely gone. I'm leaving, she said without looking up. I'm going to stay with my mother for a while. Running away? Trying to figure out what's left of my life. She finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Genuine remorse. Peterson fired me today, effective immediately. I heard. Margaret Wiley called me. Of course she did. Isabelle laughed bitterly. Everyone wants to hear from the wronged husband. Everyone wants to know how the poor betrayed man is handling his wife's infidelity. How am I handling it? Better than I expected. You're not falling apart. You're not begging me to stay. You're not even angry anymore. You're just cold. Would you prefer me to be angry? I'd prefer you to be something, anything. This calm, controlled version of you is terrifying. I sat down across from her, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly as she spoke. You wanted me to be more interesting, more passionate, less predictable, I said. Congratulations, you got your wish. This isn't what I wanted. What did you want, Isabelle? Really? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. I wanted to feel important, she said finally. I wanted to feel like I mattered to someone, like I was worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for. I wanted to feel alive. And Etienne made you feel that way? For a while, until his wife showed up, and he made it clear that I was just a convenient distraction. Her voice broke slightly. He never had any intention of leaving her. I destroyed my marriage, my career, my reputation for a man who saw me as a temporary amusement. Yes, you did. Aren't you going to say you're sorry? That you understand why I did it? That you forgive me? I considered her questions carefully. I am sorry. Sorry that you felt so empty in our marriage, that you had to look elsewhere for validation. I do understand why you did it. You were selfish and impulsive, and convinced yourself that you deserved something better. But forgive you? I shook my head. No, I don't forgive you. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Why not? Because forgiveness requires genuine remorse, and you're not sorry you had the affair. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry there were consequences. You're sorry your plan didn't work out the way you wanted. I stood up, suddenly tired of the conversation. But you're not sorry you betrayed me. That's not true. Isn't it? If Etienne had been willing to leave his wife, if your job hadn't been threatened, if your mother hadn't pushed you to confess, would you be sitting here apologizing to me? She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it, unable to form the lie. That's what I thought. I picked up her suitcase and carried it to the front door. Give my regards to your mother. I'm sure she'll have plenty of advice about how this is all my fault. Daniel, wait. She followed me to the door, tears streaming down her face. What happens now? What happens to us? There is no us anymore, Isabelle. You made sure of that. I opened the door and set her suitcase outside. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. Try not to lie to him. He's very good at spotting deception. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looking back at the house we'd shared, the life we'd built, the marriage she'd destroyed. I did love you, she said quietly. Maybe not enough, maybe not the right way, but I did love you. I know, I said. That's what makes this so much worse. I closed the door and listened to her car drive away, carrying the last remnants of the woman I'd married 8 years ago. The house felt different now, emptier but somehow cleaner, like a wound that had finally been properly cleaned and could begin to heal. In my office, I opened my laptop and began typing an email to Robert Kim. Rob, please file the divorce papers tomorrow. It's time to make this official. Then I poured myself a scotch and sat in my living room, surrounded by the furniture and decorations we'd chosen together, and began planning what I was going to build from the ruins of my old life. Something better, something honest, something that couldn't be destroyed by lies, something that was entirely my own,